And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Still Curtain podcast. I'm your host, Tommy Jaggi, editor of StillCurtain.com. Joining me, as always, is Still Curtain contributor Shayne Kubas. We are previewing the Steelers versus Falcons Week 1 matchup today. So excited for NFL football. We got our first game tomorrow night, Chiefs and Ravens, so that should be exciting. Big AFC implications there. Shayne, are you ready for this?
I am, and unfortunately, though, I'm not in my normal situation. For those of you who consistently watch the pod, first of all, thank you very much. But also, you might notice that I have a lot of things behind me that are not there, particularly this very funny dog photo that my brother thinks is funny. But no, I'm in the state of Maryland, behind enemy lines, you could say right now, visiting family. So different setup, but couldn't miss this. Obviously, have to be ready to go to get kind of preview the season and get ready to go here. So.
All right, Shayne. I hope we can get out of Baltimore territory fast.
I think I should be all right. Coming up here soon. So.
No, enjoy your time there because we've got a rush ahead of us, man. We've got 18 weeks nonstop action starting now, and we are thrilled about it. Shayne, I want to start off talking about Cam Heyward's extension today. Big news, although not unforeseen news here. Like we thought this extension was coming. It was a matter of what the contract numbers look like, and I think it's pretty favorable. I mean, granted, Heyward's an older player at this point, 35 and a half, I believe. And so the Steelers gave him a 3-year, $45 million extension, 15 up front, 16 fully guaranteed. But after that, the numbers look really reasonable. And this sounds like a deal, although we don't have the exact contract structure released to us yet. It sounds like a deal they can get out of. Even after this year, if things go south, he gets a big injury, they just don't want to bring him back at that number. Maybe they can kind of say, all right, it's time to hang it up maybe. But if Heyward performs well, if he bounces back, we know he had that groin injury last year, and he looks more like the player that he did in 2022. You're going to, this is an excellent number because this yearly contract value, you look at it per year number. And I think there's so many ways to break down contracts, Shayne. You can look at the cash given in the guaranteed money, all that stuff. It's not unimportant, but the most important number in terms of how does it impact your team is what kind of salary cap space do you take up? And Heyward at $15 million per year, that puts him 21st in the NFL among all interior defenders. He's probably not the same player he was a few years ago, but there are not 21 guys at his position that are better than him in the league right now. Shayne, how do you feel about Heyward's contract? Do you think that he's going to end up playing all of this? And what do you think about the per year number here?
I think the per year number is fine. I do think there's a world where he doesn't live up to this contract because of what we saw last year and because of his age. But this gives him a very good probability to live up to it, right? Like it's not the 20 plus million that I think a lot of people were wondering if he was pushing for. It's not anything in that range. It's not something that's going to impact the cap past this year if it doesn't need to. Like you talked about, like that's kind of the most important thing when you're looking at contracts is how long could this potentially create a problem for you? If this player tomorrow up and said, I'm not playing anymore, or like had an injury where they can't play the rest of the contract, how bad is it going to be for your team? For the Steelers, it looks like not really bad at all, which is the important thing here. So the amount of money matters also, like you said, because it matters your flexibility in the moment. But it's really more about how does it affect your team 2-3 years down the road. With Heyward, it looks like as long as he's playing well, it really won't. So.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the structure of the contract is exactly the way that I would have liked to lay it out. Like if it was going to be, you were not making that blockbuster trade this year, or if you don't need that much extra cap space right away, take that cap hit now. Yeah, the last thing I wanted the Steelers to do was give Heyward a big extension, kick the cap down the road, and make it so you tack on voidable years and you're eating dead money in 2025, 26, or however they did it, 26 and 27. Like, don't let it jeopardize your future in any way, shape, or form. And this contract didn't. And so I'm good with the way that it turned out. I'm happy that a player like Heyward, a team leader, one of the best players on this team over the past decade plus, gets to start and finish his career in Pittsburgh. I do think that there's some value to that. If nothing else, is to say that just to say that you did it, like to say that this is our guy, nobody else can lay claim to him. It's not like a Deion Sanders situation or even like a Rod Woodson where it's like you played on multiple other teams and really only half or so of your career was dedicated to Pittsburgh. Like I do like that players like Troy Polamalu Ben Roethlisberger. Cam Heyward, not on that level, but really good player, an all-pro, Pro Bowl player, gets to start and finish his career in Pittsburgh. I'd be really surprised after this 3-year extension, Shayne, if he ended up playing anywhere else in the NFL. I think what'll probably happen is he'll play maybe 2 of these years and then maybe elect to retire after that, before age 37, maybe. And that's old for an interior defender. We've seen guys do it. Calais Campbell still running, but it doesn't happen very often. Heyward has the strength, the body type to keep going for several more years. But like you said, we don't know when he's going to fall off a cliff, when that point is going to come. I do like the overall structure of the contract. I think that it's a good deal, all things considered. Because remember, earlier in the offseason, he's like, I'm not taking a pay cut. I'm not taking a hometown discount to play for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I know my worth. I think I'm a top 5 player at my position. All that kind of stuff led people to think that he's going to get in the 20s. And we know the top contract right now, it's Chris Jones. I believe it's $31 million in change per year. And so you can get 2 Cam Heywards for the price of a Chris Jones. Chris Jones, obviously a better football player. But all things considered, when you look at the per year number and see that he is outside of the top 20 interior defenders, despite his age, I'm happy with that, Shayne. That's a number I can definitely live with.
Yeah, and like I said before, I think there's a high chance that he can meet that requirement of being a top 20 player at his position, right? If he's healthy, and you touched on it too, one of the reasons he's been able to maintain his level of play this long is because he's not a player that relies on a finesse game or a speed rush or anything. Like, he is a power player. This is a guy that's going to run through you, put you on the ground in the run game and the pass game. Like, that's what he does. So as long as that strength is there, as long as his body's holding up well enough, right? That's why you worry about like the lower body injuries, because you want to make sure the power from his lower half is still there. But if all things are checking out and he's healthy, he should outplay that contract theoretically.
Yeah, for sure. And it's so hard to even do it this way, Shayne, to say like, all right, you are a top 5 player, you need a top player, 5.
Yeah.
So because the contracts flip-flop each other all the time. I'll give you an example. Calvin Ridley is making $23 million a year at wide receiver. Do I think that he's a top 15 or 20 receiver in the league? No, I don't. And so, but it's what the market demands. And so I was happy
more about
to get
timing
in at the
than it
price
is
point.
performance a lot of the time with these contracts, especially like the non-top contracts. Because, obviously like the Justin Jeffersons of the world, the Tyreek Hills, like they're making 30, 35 million because they're the best at their position. But Calvin Ridley making 23 is not necessarily because he is anywhere close to them. It's just because he happened to hit the market at a good time, right? Like that's what it really is more about. So with Cam being on the team, he's being extended. He's not a free agent. As a free agent, he might have gotten a 2-year, like $42 million, $45 million deal from a team that needed a true presence inside. Like that's possible for him. But I think he obviously prioritized staying with Pittsburgh.
Yeah, kudos for pulling the trigger there, and he gets a lot of money up front. I'm sure he's
he'll be happy to have that. Yeah.
All things considered, the way it's structured, it does not hurt this team in the future, and that was the most important thing to me. Because if this team can't win a championship right now, then you don't want to jeopardize your chances in the future. Even though the cap goes up every year, Steelers are projected to have a lot of cap space next season. None of that is going to be affected by this, so I think that's good. So the next question, Shayne, is who comes next in the contract negotiations here for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Do we see another deal get done? Because this season is right on the horizon. You can see the sun coming up here on the 2024 season. Pat Freiermuth is obviously the name out there, right? That is the guy. And a lot of people thought that Pat would get done before Heyward. Do you see his contract getting done before the season?
So if I was Pat Freiermuth, I would not sign a contract before the beginning of the season, because I think he's going to have at least his second best, if not his best season this year if he stays healthy in this offense, because I do think it's a good fit for him. I think Arthur Smith knows that his receiver talent outside of Pickens is just not particularly great right now. You have high hopes for Wilson. You hope that Austin shows something, but really it's a Pickens and Freiermuth show in terms of the passing game right now. At least it should be. So if I was him, I would be betting on myself and saying, hey, I was not healthy last year, didn't put up great numbers. This offense should be better, even if it's marginally. I would love them to get him done at a reasonable cost, but I don't know if I was him, if I would do it.
Yeah, I totally understand that mindset. And I'm not sure if he will or not, because like you said, he doesn't have to sign that yet. He can wait. He can bet on himself. The issue with doing that with a guy that already has an injury history
Yeah, as you
and a
bet
guy
on
that
your
played 12
body
games
then
last
too.
season, I mean, that production was bad last year. And
Yeah.
so I think because of that, I would bet on myself. I would say, all right, you're not going to try
I'm
to
definitely better
weasel
than
me
that.
into a lesser deal. I'm going to come out here and I'm going to get whatever, 70 receptions and 800 yards and 7 touchdowns, whatever it is. I'm going to string together a good season with a competent offensive coordinator and a competent quarterback, and I'm going to go get my bag. That's what I think that would probably be his best play if I was his agent. But maybe in the back of his mind, he's saying, hey, I'm a couple concussions away from being out of this league and another soft tissue injury away from getting my numbers cut in half here. And so I can see it both ways with him because of his injury history, but he's definitely the next guy in line. Like he's that one. And the Steelers have money. Like you have to spend X amount of your 90% of your cash over a 3-year span, I think is what it is.
Yeah, something like that.
So it's they have the money to spend, and I would be surprised if he didn't remain with the Steelers after this year, whether that contract extension comes now or directly after the season. I know that he's not an elite tight end, Shayne, but the tight end market really isn't that bad. I mean, you're looking compared to like wide receivers getting 34, 31, $30 million a year, those top guys. And you've got Travis Kelce's getting $17 million and George Kittle's getting $16 million. Like in comparison, Freiermuth's contract is going to be pretty reasonable and one that's pretty easy to stomach, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to how much, like looking at it from both sides, right? If you're Freiermuth, I would prioritize betting on myself because I think that I can get more money that way. But if the Steelers are offering me like $13-14 million over 2 or 3 years as an extension, that's a nice chunk of change. And then you're still going to be young enough to probably get another contract after that, depending on the length that they're trying to sign him to, right? If it's a long-term extension, that's when you're starting to say, okay, maybe it's better if I try to just, go out there and have a huge season, because the tight end market kind of needs a reset. We haven't really seen it happen in the way that the receiver market has. Obviously, there's less guys who are worth that type of contract, and there's going to be some guys coming up, the Laporta of the world in a couple of years when his contract comes up with the Lions, guys like that are going to kind of do that. Freiermuth might be able to not quite reset it, but get close to that high water mark if he has a good season this year, if he hits free agency.
Yeah, I get that. And so that's why I think that he probably would be wise to bet on himself. I mean, Cole Kmet, for example, in his new deal, $12.5 million per season.
Right.
Like that's a number that's pretty easy to stomach. You can structure that any way you want to. Mark Andrews, as good as he is, even though he had that injury, $14 million per season. And so it's going to be in that ballpark. I'd be surprised if he topped Andrews. Like he's just never had
especially
that kind of
if it's before the season, especially.
Yeah. It's contracts flip-flop each other all the time. It's just the way that it works. It doesn't mean that one player is better than the other, but with the cap going up. But I agree. I think that's the next contract up. I think Freiermuth would be wise to wait, assuming he doesn't have some catastrophic injury that
There's always that risk there.
So he can get some security by taking a deal with the Steelers, but that'll be up to him and his agent there. Anything else you want to get to, Shayne, before we keep moving on here?
We do have a couple of chats, but I also wanted to mention, as far as who's next, a name that should be on that list, but it doesn't seem to be, is James Daniels, the offensive guard. He should be somebody that they look to, in my opinion, to extend, especially Seumalo's had the injury to start the year. He's going to obviously be back, you hope, pretty soon. They did draft McCormick, obviously, which I was assuming at the time of the draft that it may be a Seumalo replacement long-term, but it seems like it might be a Daniels replacement long-term. That is something I'm confused about still, but just wanted to throw that out there, that if I was the Steelers, I would be trying to lock him down, especially with the way the guard market is. If teams aren't super, like if the league isn't super high on him and you can get him for cheap again, I would do that just to guarantee that spot. But that's one I wanted to mention.
Shayne, I'm glad you brought that up, and I want to chime in on that real quickly here too, because you've got James Daniels this year. You've got Isaac Seumalo under contract for 2 more years.
Yeah.
What you could do theoretically is you could cut Seumalo after this season. The way contract is structured in a way you can save a lot of money.
Yep.
Take that money and use it to re-sign James Daniels.
And have
if you wanted that as an option, now you can keep both of them. You've got the cap space to do it.
You can.
So,
but
if you had to choose one between Seumalo and Daniels, Daniels is significantly younger and certainly healthier right now than Seumalo is dealing with a pec injury and is going to be 32 years old, I believe, when his contract is up, or at least going into the following year. James Daniels is 26 years old still. And the guy was a 20-year-old coming into the NFL. And so
Iowa,
you could get, and really offensive linemen peak age like 27 to 31 years old.
30s, than
so
20s
so technically he hasn't even hit that peak yet, whereas Seumalo is coming out the other side of it. I think it's worth mentioning for sure. Even if you think that Seumalo is a little bit better than Daniels right now, you have to, it's all about where are you going to be a few years from now? Like how do you best open up that Super Bowl window, and maybe keeping Daniels around long-term is a better option. What do you think about that?
I do agree with that because, one, you talk about the age factor. Like, linemen play a lot longer, it feels like nowadays, especially like the tackles. But even guards, if you're a really good guard, Kevin Zeiler, for example, now he's a great player and has always been, but he's 34, still going as strong as ever, right? You have other guys across the league that are doing that. But I think with Daniels, more specifically than just that he's younger and probably going to eventually, if not already, be better, is he's a better system fit for Arthur Smith's offense. He's more of that athlete at the position where he can get out in wide zone, he can hit landmarks that are out in space. Like, that's more of his game than Seumalo. It's not that Seumalo can't do that and won't be good at that, but it's not the true strength of his game. He's more that mauling type, which you need that still in any offense that's going to run the ball a lot. But theoretically, if I had to keep one just off of like nothing else but scheme fit, it would be also Daniels anyway.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to a degree for sure. All right, Shayne, what chats you want to get to here?
So we had a question about Ben Skoranek on the practice squad, actually.
All right.
Can you see, of course, it's our Barley 18, our friend joining us today, of course. Can you see Skoranek taking Connor Heyward's spots? Seems like a much better fit. Imagine the things you could do with assuming him and Patterson in the backfield, form from the 4 wide receivers in the second, matchup nightmare. The problem with Skoranek is that he is very much a fullback in a wide receiver's body, in the sense that his best attribute is his ability to block. Now, that's something this team will need and will probably ask at some point for him to come up and do, possibly, especially if the passing game is struggling and they need to lean into the run game. I could see a guy like him coming up to kind of fill one of the receiver spots, even if he's not going to catch a lot of passes. But I do think him and Heyward are very different players, and I think Hayward's role is just going to be a different thing than Skoranek would provide. So I don't see him taking a spot necessarily. I could see him taking the spot of like a Scotty Miller or somebody like that if they're not really using him in the passing game enough, especially a guy like Miller, because of what he can do on special teams and as a kind of designated blocker type. So that's a good, interesting question, though.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think he's taking Heyward's spot. I think they like the role. They like his flexibility. He can play that H-back role. Not that Skoranek can't. I think that's some of his
he can do that
as well.
Stuff, yeah.
I mean, the guy's big. He's 6'4", 227 pounds. Like, he's a big receiver who's a blocking specialist. But I think you can probably view him as Heyward and Michael Pruitt, like insurance. Maybe if one of those guys goes down, you can get a flexible guy that you can just move all up and down the line of scrimmage there and have him come in for blocking purposes for the Steelers. I like the signing for the practice squad. I don't see it making that next level impact or supplanting the guy on the roster just yet. Maybe, like you said, taking that 5th wide receiver spot if the Steelers feel like they need more blocking instead of more like slot receiver redundancy.
Right. That was kind of my thought process too. And then question about Calvin Austin. Also, am I the only one who's not high on Austin at all? His size makes him limited and makes quarterbacks have to be flawless in targeting him. He has a small catch radius. That is fair. Now, my thing with him is it's not so much that I think he's like truly this transcendent talent that we're just not using, but it's like you don't have anybody who can do what he does, right? There's like Scotty Miller aside, even he's not the same athlete as Austin is. You have to, with an offense that is this devoid of receiving talent, you have to find a way to get this guy involved, in my opinion, because he is a good enough receiver where if you can target him effectively, right, he can get into open enough space to not worry about the catch radius that much, especially as a gadget player and even down the field as kind of like a deep threat at times as well, right, where it's more about dropping it into him and less about fitting into a tight space. If they can't do that, my only question then is like, okay, who's going to do that then? Is it going to be Roman Wilson? Because I hope so eventually, but he didn't have a true training camp. He's hopefully going to be healthy enough to play week 1 if he gets on the field at all. But we don't have anybody with that skill set. So I don't necessarily think he's going to break out or anything. But if anyone's going to, he's one of the guys I think has at least a chance to maybe do that.
Yeah, I get the concerns. I'm not ready to pull the plug on Austin.
No, me either.
Yeah,
Exactly.
He had a few big plays in that first preseason game, really quiet the next two games, hardly did anything. But it's preseason, and we see how misleading that can be. The Kenny Pickett prime example last year with his perfect passer rating. I want to give him a good chunk of this beginning of the year for the Steelers to see what he can do. Can this guy make plays with the ball in his hands? Can he be Tank Dell light? Can he be a guy that just impresses you? Like, show me Steelers, show me Arthur Smith that you can get him matched up in man coverage and put him on a drag route and just race
let him run
across the field with his 4.3 speed and his 11'6" broad jump. Like, this guy is explosive. Get the ball in his hands. Let's see if he's got some natural receiving ability. Like I kind of thought he did coming out of Memphis. I thought he was more than just a gadget. But I want to see it. And again, when it comes to Austin, no question he's drawn a short straw here. Missed his whole rookie season with a foot injury. Year 2, he's at the mercy of a bad Kenny Pickett and the worst OC in football in Matt Canada. And so the looks he was getting were not high quality looks. He was not used, I thought, to the best of his skill set. And so I would give him another chance. And if he doesn't prove it in the first half of the season, by all means, move on, find something else that's going to work, whether that's Roman Wilson, Scotty Miller, something on the free agent wire, whatever you do here. You got to find something that can work opposite Pickens, but I do want to give him a little bit of chance. I think the question is absolutely fair, though, considering he only has 17 catches on 30 targets, I think, in his first 2 seasons. So not a lot of production for sure. Anybody else, if you've got questions or joining us in the live chat, please drop them in here. Shayne and I love answering any questions that you might have, or at least trying to provide the best answer that we can. All right. Shayne, are we ready to move on to our next?
Did you want to talk about the odd offensive line decisions that we always have to talk about?
I do want to do that. I want to do that before we get to Russell Wilson. I just want to sigh for a minute. Just let me take a deep breath here. Okay. So Mike Tomlin addressed the media this week in his pregame press conference. If you missed that, he was asked about the offensive line, and the questions, the responses that he gave were, I want to say head scratching, but it's beyond that. It's beyond that at this point, Shayne. I'm dumbfounded by some of his responses because you're not giving us anything. You're not giving us an answer. And it seems like some of the choices that Tomlin's making, I'm going on a rant here for a second. Hope you don't mind. Some of the choices that he's making with the offensive line are the exact opposite of what I want them to do, the exact opposite of what the fan base wants him to do. And so to recap here, Tomlin said that his decision on Broderick Jones, where to play him, drum roll, is that he's not made a decision. But he also noted shortly after that he likes Jones's flexibility and his ability to play right tackle. So Shayne, what it sounds like right now, and nothing has been solidified here, but it sounds like you've got Dan Moore, the 4th-year guy that you've been trying to replace the last several years, completely unabated by competition at all whatsoever at left tackle. And you're going to have Broderick Jones, your 14th overall pick from 2023, and Troy Fautanu, your 20th overall pick this year, battling it out at right tackle to begin the season. Is that the choice that you would have made here?
No. To put it lightly, I will say when I saw that press conference and I heard what he said, my first thought was, Tommy's going to be so sad. That was literally the first thing. I'm like, because he's been so just like distraught about the situation all off season, and like he should be. I was like, he's gonna be so upset. But no, really, it's again, it's ridiculous. There's a lot of things that NFL head coaches do, Tomlin included, and others that kind of make everybody scratch their heads. And sometimes you end up looking like the smart one, right? Like sometimes you draft, in the case of the Lions, sometimes you draft a running back and a linebacker in the first round, and then you go to the Super Bowl almost, right? And they're a big part of it. Sometimes that happens, even though everyone's like, that's probably not smart. But in this case, I would say it's at least bad asset management. Like at the very, you could take everything else away from it and say, yeah, this doesn't seem like the best way to use your resources. If you're going to spend 2 first-round picks on tackles and then possibly only one of them is going to play right now. So it's just, again, like, I don't want to keep harping on Dan Moore. Okay. I'm sure he's great. Okay. Haven't met the guy, would love to. I would tell him, like, listen, if you've ever heard me talk about you, I apologize. It is not you about you as a person, but I have to say this again. He is not a starting NFL tackle, at least not one that you should be starting if you have any aspirations of having a good passing offense. At some point, even if you are worried it's going to tank your season, you have to throw out the left tackles that you drafted in the first round on both ends. You have to stick them on the ends of your offensive line and say, figure it out. If you're bad, we'll deal with it later. If you're good, that was the point. There's nothing you can do to make this offensive line significantly worse by playing the players that are more talented over Dan Moore. It's not going to make them worse. It might make them not much better, which is the concern, if as far as like whether these guys are good or not, but they're not going to be worse. I can promise you that. It will not be a net negative. So Tomlin, I understand you have this weird thing about veterans and like all the stuff. Just throw out your 2 young tackles, let them take their lumps. Russell Wilson's going to be retiring soon anyway, probably. He'll be all right. He'll figure it out. Just play your tackles. We'll deal with this later. You need to find an answer to whether these guys are good.
Yeah. The short-sightedness, Shayne, it just irks me so bad. I don't care if, yes, you could be worse in these first 4 whatever games of the season. It could be uglier than otherwise, but you have to look big picture here. At the sake of not ruining the guy you traded up for into the first round, you have to look big picture. He played left tackle all through high school, all through college. That is where you drafted him to play. That is where the front office said that they wanted him playing. And he's still over at right tackle. He's taken most of his snaps in the summer at right tackle. And now it's, even if they move him to left tackle at this point, Shayne, it's going to look ridiculous that you didn't play him at left tackle sooner. If you didn't play him there last year, that you didn't play him there this summer, and he's going to be behind the learning curve. It's not worth benching your guys or playing them out of position at the risk of potentially ruining your high draft choices. It's just not worth it. Like, these guys have, you hope that first and second round picks have like decade-long career ahead of them, hopefully with your football team. And the fact that you would risk stunting that development of a player just because you are so focused on the here and now and you don't care at all about 2025 or beyond, I think it's the wrong approach. I truly think it is for a team that, I mean, we don't even know what you have at quarterback. We don't know what this offense is going to look like. I mean, they were bottom offense in the league. Can you get much better in 1 year's time? We'll see. But regardless of that, make the right decision here. Play the guys that you drafted to play the positions you drafted them to play, and go from there. If you start off rocky with Broderick Jones, so be it. If you find out he's not the guy, well, then you find out he's not the guy. But we already know Dan Moore's not the guy, and you drafted 2 first-round tackles. You're only going to play one of them. I just don't get it. I don't get it. I could rant all day about it, but I'm not going to anymore. The other offensive line decision that Mike Tomlin made is that Spencer Anderson is going to start at left guard. I found this one a little bit odd as well, Shayne, because yes, Anderson is a second-year player, but he never saw an offensive snap last season. He was a 7th-round pick, came close to falling out of last year's draft. And I believe he only played, I think the number is 16, I want to say, snaps at left guard in the preseason. I'm not saying that this one is the wrong choice. This one is far less egregious than the Broderick decision and the Dan Moore decision. But Mason McCormick, I believe, played 81 snaps at left guard in the preseason, looked like the better player, is a stronger player with the better body type for the position. He's the guy you drafted in the 4th round that some people had a 3rd-round grade on. He looks the part, and he looked good next to Zach Frazier. There is the concern that you can't start 2 rookies next to each other, or 3 total on the offensive line. Fautone is out there. I get that. But for the same reasons, I think it's the wrong process, because if one of these 2 guys can be potentially a long-term answer to the position, it's McCormick. It's not Anderson.
Yeah, that's a decision too that I do think is a classic. Like, this guy is older, therefore, or not even older necessarily, because I think they're about the same age roughly. Because McCormick's older,
slightly more experienced, even though he didn't log a snap on offense.
Exactly, he is more experienced in the sense that he's been on an NFL team for longer than him.
Yeah,
I really think that's kind of the deciding factor. I really do. I think if you just watch these 2 players play, not that Anderson didn't have a good summer and he deserved to make this team. That's really not the problem. McCormick is just a better football player. There's a reason why Anderson was a 7th-round pick and why McCormick was a 4th-round pick that could have been a higher pick than that. I just think that when it comes to this team, we've seen it time and time again where it doesn't matter if you're better necessarily. It matters that you are more equipped to start right away or play right away. And unfortunately, in the case of McCormick, I think he's both, but it won't matter because of the first one. So I think Tomlin wants the guy out there that he trusts more, which is always pretty much going to be the guy who he's been around longer.
Yep, and I think that's the reason why Levi Wallace played until the bye week last year. When
I hope so. I hope that's the reason, because if it was an evaluation thing, then I'd like new evaluators, please.
Yeah, I'm all for guys that are good team leaders and good team guys, but play the talented players. Come on, this is a $1 billion business. You got to play the more talented guys. And if we can see it at home, if we're these armchair analysts and we can see vividly which player is better than the other, play those guys. Those are the ones that need to be out on the football field. All right, we're going to move on to the next segment now. If you are a fan of Pittsburgh Steelers and you would like to support the Steel Curtain podcast, please consider subscribing to the Steel Curtain podcast on YouTube. We appreciate all of your support. If you like this show and you find this interesting, please tell your friends about it. We'd like to get as many live viewers as possible. And if you're here with us, drop a live chat to us. Ask us a question, leave a comment, whatever you want to do, and Shayne and I will get to those. All right, Shayne, we're going to run through this fairly briefly because we want to do the Steelers versus Falcons week 1 preview and talk about this upcoming matchup today, or this week, excuse me. But I do want to talk about Russell Wilson here and where he ranks among NFL quarterbacks. And the reason I think this exercise is important is because so much of your team's success is tied to the quarterback position. We took Ben for granted in his later years, although he wasn't the same player he once was. He was heads and shoulders above what we've seen the last couple of seasons. So yes, there's always room to go down. Having said that, there's no doubt in my mind Russell Wilson is an upgrade over Kenny Pickett. I truly believe that he is. The question is how much so? And I think the question is not whether or not Wilson is an upgrade over Pickett. The question is, where does he rank among NFL quarterbacks? These are the guys you're going against. You're not going against Pickett. Pickett's
hopefully not
string,
the Eagles
potentially even third string on the Eagles. You are going against the other quarterbacks in the league, and we've seen how hard it is to score points when you're going toe-to-toe with these guys. Can you match them? Now, the defense obviously can aid you in that regard, but when you play good quarterbacks like the Steelers did in the playoffs, you give up 31 points to Buffalo, you can only keep a good quarterback down so long. And so quarterbacks are essential. It's so hard to win without a top 10 or 15 quarterback in the NFL, like really win, make that deep playoff dive and potentially Super Bowl run. So I've got the list up here, Shayne. This was the one that was just dropped from the Ringer, and we're going to start at the top of this. And some of these are going to be really, really easy. We won't have to spend any time at all discussing, but we're going to start at the top of this list of the top quarterbacks heading into the 2024 season. We're going to work our way down the list, and we're going to find out how many starting quarterbacks in this league are better than Russell Wilson, in our opinion. And Shayne, if you had to just come up with a number off the top of your head, I'm going to put you on the spot here. What do you think that number would be? And then we'll decide when we have this list done here, what do you think it's going to be?
Well, I'm pretty sure that they have him 25 or something like that in that list. But I think for me, he's somewhere in the like 18 to 23 range. It's somewhere in that, because again, I'm thinking about rookies. You don't know enough about them to really confidently rank them above like veterans who can actually still play to some degree. Although there's some I would obviously probably rather have this year even as rookies than him, but that's just more because of like fit and everything else. But I think it's going to end up somewhere in that like 18 to 23, probably closer to the 20s somewhere, but somewhere in that range is where I think we'll end up with him.
Yeah, and I haven't actually gone through all of them yet, and so I don't know what the exact answer is. I would say 22-ish, 23, somewhere in there. And let's go down through this. And Shayne, we're going to do it just for this year, because obviously if we're looking big picture here, he's going to be
because there's backups that are
yes, there's backups that offer more to your teams. There's the Michael Penix and the guys that aren't even playing right now that you would rather have for the future. So we're just focusing on 2024. Let's go down through the list. Would you rather have, here we go, Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes?
Oh, man, I don't know. Probably Taylor Swift's friend, Patrick Mahomes. No.
Yeah, we're going to go through these top ones fast. Lamar Jackson, obviously not.
Lamar. Yeah.
Josh Allen, Justin Herbert. They have Matt Stafford 5. I find that one interesting, but still,
I'd have him closer to 5 than most people would too, but probably not 5. But closer.
He is good. He's good. I do think he's a little bit underrated these days. Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence. Let's pump out a couple of these at the same time. So just for time saving reasons here. Number 9, Aaron Rodgers. Obviously,
yeah, even now, you know, maybe
even
with
coming
the
off the blown Achilles.
Yeah, even with the Achilles, he might be
Mhm.
upload again and still might be able to go out there and just gut it out. I don't know, but anyway.
One-legged.
Yeah.
Geno Smith, number 10.
I'm interesting. It's interesting they have him that high. I
It
do
is.
like him a lot, but obviously I would rather have Geno currently than Russ.
Yeah, for sure. CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, those are pretty easy
Yeah,
to
those are
me.
easy
I think,
ones.
boy, those are two of the biggest breakouts quarterbacks from last year that Scott Arrow's pointing right up. Kyler Murray, 13.
Yeah, I'd rather have Kyler.
Yep. Jared Goff, 14.
Definitely, especially now with the way he's matured as a quarterback, definitely rather have Jared.
For sure. Kirk Cousins, our week 1 matchup here, 15.
Yeah, he would have been an upgrade over what we have right now, at least in the short term. So I would definitely give it to Kirk on that one.
Yeah, and I think money speaks to the fact
It
that
does.
Kirk can get as much as he does.
Yeah.
So Brock Purdy, 16. So
yeah, my feelings about Brock Purdy aside, I think that's a comfortable. I think that's a good range for him to land in because I think as an individual player, I think that the skills he does have give him kind of a really nice floor that kind of puts him in there. So I would rather have Brock right now.
Definitely. Jalen Hurts at 17.
Definitely rather Jalen. I think that's a little low. I think people are down on him because of last year, but I think he was banged up a lot. I think he's going to be closer to 10 this year, but that's my thing.
And Tua Tagovailoa at 18.
Yeah, Tua, again, very limited player, but what he does really well is valuable. So I would rather have him even in an offense like this.
Okay, so Shayne, now we're approaching that range of guys that could possibly be in contention where you would say, I would rather have Russell Wilson in 2024 than this player. And at 19 on the list is New Orleans Saints Derek Carr.
Man, that's actually a really good one to jump onto because I kind of feel similarly about them in terms of like they frustrate me to watch in the last couple of years where I feel like Carr has more left to him as a passer than Russell does as far as like overall arm talent does. But man, neither of these guys are really super willing to force things and try to get big plays. Like they're kind of like Russ does still have his moon ball to him, and Carr will throw a deep ball occasionally, but the aggressiveness isn't quite there with either of them as much anymore. So I'd still probably rather have Derek. I think that he has a little bit more left in the tank than Russ, but that is pretty close for me.
Yeah, I think that one, this is where the discussion starts. Like, I think all those names prior, it's like no question
pretty
in my
comfortably
mind.
Rather
even for just the 2024 season, I'd rather have them over what I think that we're getting in Wilson. But I think this is the one that starts because Carr is similar in a lot of ways where I think these numbers are inflated. Like Carr had 25 touchdowns and 8 picks last year. He wasn't as good as what his passer rating, 97.7 passer rating would have indicated. So his EPA, success rate and stuff, all very average. But I do think that I would still take Carr. I would give the edge to Carr over Russell Wilson. So that takes us, now we're at 20. And that is, would you take the uncertainty of Caleb Williams over? I would as well, because the potential upside there. I mean, we're talking about a generational quarterback
way that it's brought up because he has way more ability to be a hero ball player right now than Russ does, just physically.
For sure.
Right. So if that's one of the reasons why we've been talking about whether Fields should probably start, even if maybe he isn't necessarily good, he might just be a better fit for our current roster construction. So for Williams, especially, like I know he's rookie. That's the whole bag of worms. Maybe he's just bad, which I don't think, but still, I think he would just be a better fit for what we have going on in general.
Yeah, I would take the uncertainty of that, knowing how good of a prospect he is over what you're getting in a Russell Wilson who turns 36 this November. And so I think the arrow is pointing the opposite direction for both of those two players. Number 21, Anthony Richardson.
Ooh, for 2020. So the thing with Richardson is I want to love him more than I do. And I do think he's going to be a good enough passer accuracy-wise to make this offense work. But it's mostly because of the offensive construction. I think he's a year away from being like a big part of the solution there offensively, more so than just a part of it. For 2024, it was still the legs. Like he'd still provide so much to the offense with his legs and get us out of trouble. I'd still probably rather have Richardson, accuracy issues and all.
Yeah. I agree. And maybe this is more of a Shayne Steichen endorsement than a Richardson now.
But right now, at least, I think. But still, his skill set is just so – it's really hard
It's rare. It's
a better Fields skill set, right? Like where Fields probably still a little bit more accurate than Richardson is right now, but Richardson's even more bigger, like even bigger, more athletic somehow, in my opinion. Like, still very similar situation there. So,
all right, Shayne. So we are both 21 deep right now, and we have not found that spot where we would feel comfortable plugging in Russell Wilson. So 22 on the list, Baker Mayfield.
I'd rather have Baker. I feel like 20. I understand there's like a level of like wondering if he can repeat his success from last year, but like he's just a better player at this point than probably some of the guys that have already been said. But that's beside the point.
Yeah.
But I would rather have Baker. Yeah.
I think he's a little bit underrated even these days.
Maybe
like
now, yeah.
I think there was a time where Baker was overrated, and now I think it's flipped back the other way, and he's not getting enough credit for the season that he's just coming off of right now.
I'd rather have
28 touchdowns, 4,000 yards. Yeah. I would too.
So
yeah,
like, I don't know.
Just more upside in the passing game with him than Carr.
Yeah.
Similar otherwise. 23. I'm not a fan of this guy at all. And when they gave him a contract extension, I was like, are you kidding me? Daniel Jones.
Yeah. Okay. This is where I think me and you maybe will be on in alignment here. I would rather have Russell Wilson than Daniel Jones. I cannot stand watching Daniel Jones play football. And granted, okay, I don't really truly know if he is more valuable of a player at this point than Wilson is. I'd have to really think about it. But just from like a watching them play football standpoint, I despise watching Daniel Jones play football. And I know he's been in bad situations. I understand all that. But, man, he does not make it easier to root for him with the way he plays football sometimes. And the stuff he does and the interceptions he throws. Like, it's one of those things where it's not just that he throws picks. It's the type of picks that he throws where I'm like, come on, man. Like, this is Jameis Winston stuff you're doing out here. Like, what are you doing? So I would take Wilson at this point over Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that at least Wilson, he's going to give you a big enough baseline. He's not going to do
I think he's
too much.
Just a little bit more consistent of a player, even if it's not spectacular. It's not as catastrophic as Daniel Jones is capable of being.
Agreed. And for what it's worth, before Daniel Jones got injured last year, 2 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, 5.7 yards an attempt, 30th in EPA, 27th in success rate. It's not very good numbers at all. And so, I would take that. So, Shayne, you and I are both at 23. So remember our number right now. I'm going to keep going a few down the list. We're going to get to 32 because we may not agree with everything they have on here. And so the next one, Shayne, is Deshaun Watson at 24. Browns quarterback. Definitely wasn't the same player as he was at Houston, but would you take Watson for the 2024 season on the Steelers over Russell Wilson?
Honestly, if I have to try to be fair about this because like obviously there's an added element of like not wanting him on your team for separate reasons, but we're not going to talk about that for this case. I think just from what he's shown as a Brown, I would not take him over Wilson, but I assume he's going to be somewhat better than that at some point. I don't think he's ever going to get close to the top 10 again. I really don't. Like I think at this point, if he was going to, it would have happened. But I do think he's going to play marginally better than he did last year and in general since he's been a Brown. But I don't know if that necessarily means it's going to be better than Wilson either. So I think I'd still lean towards Wilson in this case for next year.
Okay. And I think that's totally fair as well. And again, we're talking Watson just on your football team, not anything else.
Just as a quarterback. It's been rough.
Yeah, just as a quarterback. We're going to ignore the other stuff for now. I think I would take Watson.
And I get that. I would take the upside is there still.
Yes, and if he does come back at all, play-wise to where he was in Houston, I think that's going to be more valuable. And I think there's a better chance of him rebounding than Russell Wilson because of the age and because of what should be left in the tank still. We'll see. I mean, the arm and everything hasn't looked all that special since he's been in Cleveland. So, but I think I would. And so, Shayne, that puts you still at 23. That puts me at 24.
Yeah.
The next name on the list is Jacoby Brissett.
Yeah, I like Jacoby. I'm glad he's going to get to play for a little while here, even though he's kind of being thrown to the wolves just to save Drake May from total annihilation. But I do like Jacoby. I think he's the classic example of a starting caliber quarterback who you don't want to start for your team because it means that, well, you don't want him starting unless there's a rookie behind him, right? Because that means that you're really in the dumps at quarterback right now. Not that we're any better really than the Patriots, but the point is like he's a guy that has not been a consistent starter and is only going to be one when the situation calls for it, right? So I would rather have Wilson than him still.
I do agree with that as well. I think he's one of the best backups in the league.
Yes,
That's
I think
what you're getting out of him, though, is backup level play, and you need more than that. Wilson, even at his old age, offers more potential upside than what Jacoby Brissett would. Next on the list, Shayne, is Will Levis. Are you a Will Levis believer? I haven't really talked to you much about Levis.
I want to, because he's so fun to watch play, but man, he is Jameis Winston incarnate. That he is that same, like, I have all this talent. I'm going to use every ounce of it every play, and if I throw an interception, so be it. If I throw it in triple coverage, oh well. If I have to put mayo in my coffee, no. But the point is with him is, like, theoretically, he gives you much more upside even just this year, right? But he could legitimately tank your entire season. Like, that's his play style to a T, where, like, if it works, it's going to look awesome. I mean, you look at his start last year, when he threw like 4 touchdowns his first start, like, it looked awesome. And then he kept playing, and he started doing wild stuff. His average depth of target, I forget, it was something stupid, like some stupid number that he put up, because he was just throwing the ball, which, again, I appreciate that. It's fun. But I don't know if it's really – I don't know if it's the best situation if you were to plop him in the Steelers offense right now. I mean, him and Pickens would probably have some fun plays, but that's about it. I'd probably still lean Wilson for this year, just because I haven't seen enough of him to think that he has the baseline of play yet. Yeah. Right. So
I think that's fair. And so, I mean, he's traits wise, like, he's way up there. I mean, that the guy can throw the ball, he can run the football.
Oh yeah.
You're hoping that he's closer to Josh Allen than he is to
Jameis Winston.
Yeah. And the legs are obviously better than Jameis, but arm talent wise, for sure. I still think if the goal is to get to like that 10-11 wins and try to win a playoff game just for the 2024 season, obviously we're looking beyond, I would take him.
Right. Yeah.
For the 2024 season, I would keep Russell Wilson. I think he gives you a better chance, more stability to do that, and not going to cost you as many games probably as what Levis will. We'll see if he ends up taking that step. So that still leaves you at 23, me at 24. The next name on the list, we're going to skip over because that is Russell Wilson at 27. So we're going to go past him. Jaden Daniels at 28.
You see, Jaden Daniels is an interesting one for me, because I vehemently disagreed with the Patriots with the Patriots getting Drake May because Washington got Jaden Daniels. It's not that I don't like him. It's that I just feel like if you're trying to take somebody who might be able to completely turn around your franchise, I don't think Daniels is that type of prospect. I think he's a very good prospect, but he has a lot of bust potential. A lot of the same concerns for a lot of guys that have, like, a long time to throw in college, who kind of play in an offense that's, like, not that it's simple, but it's a lot of, like, there's a lot of slot fades. It was a lot of just Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. being better than the corners they played against. And now, granted, to his credit, he put the ball in the money. Like, he was playing his part in it. But I think his improvising isn't something that was as good as people might think it is. He wasn't so much like a guy who ran around and then found plays down the field as much as he was, I'm either throwing or I'm running. Like, it was like I'm running with the football or I'm throwing it. But in our offense, that's kind of what I would want them to do with Fields anyway. So, like, I might take Daniels for this year just based off that, because at least you get the running element of things, and he might be a good enough passer to occasionally hit on some deep shots to Pickens and stuff like that. So I think I'd actually probably for this year, just because of his skill set, I might take him over Wilson.
Yeah. I am a Daniels believer, and I'm going to take him over Wilson. And I think that he can be a Lamar Jackson light early in his career, where you still offer very much of the same running bill. I mean, Jackson's one of, like, the best rushing quarterback of all time. So I'm not going to put him in that category yet.
No, he's more of like the Kyler Fields level type of runner.
Blows past people. Yeah. And so it's still a very valuable trait. And so I think that can help you to success early on, just like it did for Lamar. And I think part of the reason why Lamar's regular season record is so good, like the best of any quarterback in the league, is because it gives you that, it raises that baseline when you're able to effortlessly move the chains with your legs. Whatever you're able to offer as a passer is just a bonus on top of that. And so I think I would take him as well. So that puts you at 24, Shayne, and me at 25. All right, we're almost through the list here. Bear with us. Next name, Sam Darnold.
Yeah, Sam, I really feel bad for you. You've gotten short end of the stick, like every place you've been. I can't put you on my team as a starting quarterback and feel good about it at all. So I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I hope it goes well with the Vikings, but I'll take Wilson.
Yeah, Sam Darnold's always had like a very Daniel Jonesy taste in my mouth. So slightly different types of quarterbacks, but I mean, no, I'm not taking Sam Darnold over Russell Wilson. So we remain at 24 and 25. Bryce Young at 30.
Oh, man. I feel so bad for Bryce because I legitimately think he's a better player than he showed last year. He would have been a better player any other team.
Dumpster fire organization is where he landed.
Literally any other team in the league would have been at least, I think, a capable rookie quarterback, legitimately. But just from what we saw last year and the size concerns and some of the stuff, like I think he's going to end up probably playing better than Wilson by this time next year. Like he'll be going into the season with higher hopes, but I probably just for the sake of feeling more confident that it's going to actually work at the NFL level. I know Russ has worked. We don't know if Young will for sure, so I'll take Russ still.
Yeah, Shayne, I was furious when the Panthers traded up and it wasn't to draft CJ Stroud. I did not want Stroud in the AFC. I
didn't help, yeah.
Stroud was significantly higher on my draft board. I wasn't one of the ones that had Young as one of my top picks that year. So to me, no, I'm not taking Bryce Young over Russell Wilson. I don't think that he's going to work out, honestly. And I would have issue drafting quarterbacks that are that small. Even drafting quarterbacks from Alabama. I mean, outside of
it's a risk. Yeah.
I don't like doing that. Each quarterback prospect is different, so you have to weigh them differently. But I was never a Bryce Young believer, and I'm certainly not now. So I would take Russell over him. Number 31 on this list here is Gardner Minshew.
Yeah, I love Gardner. He's just too volatile and too just crazy for me. Like he's not. He plays like he should be like 10. He plays like his Madden speed. Like if you look at his Madden range, you think his speed's like 90 and it's like 78. That's my problems. He kind of he tries to do too much sometimes. I'm like, Gardner, it's not your thing, man. Like, so I'd rather have Russ still. Yeah.
I agree. High end backup, low end starter. I'm taking Russ over Gardner Minshew. And then the last name on this list is Bo Nix, number 32.
I like Nix a little bit in the sense that I think he should have been drafted like at the beginning of the second round and could start right away because of his experience. And so you end up getting you pay the quarterback tax if you're Sean Payton, and also because you need somebody to play quarterback. So if you have Sean Payton, the answer would be Bo Nix. If you ask anybody else, I don't know, because again, he's a rookie. The upside's kind of low for me, in my opinion. I think he kind of has developed into this type of quarterback that he's not the Auburn Bo Nix. That was too insane, but he's also not got enough of that left where I think he's going to incorporate that a lot into his game. So he's kind of just this like mid-tier quarterback prospect. So for me, at least in a year one situation, I'm still taking Wilson.
I agree. It's Wilson over Nix. I would trust Wilson to get you there where you want to go this year more than the rookie, who I'm not a big fan of this year. I do think that
definitely overdrafted
for sure, which again, you pay a premium for quarterback. That's how important they are. All right, Shayne. So we finished with your ranking of Russell Wilson was 24th best starting quarterback in the league. Mine was 25th best starting quarterback in the league. Not ideal for a team that wants to get better. Obviously, if Kenny Pickett was back in the fold right now, 32, right? Like, would you take Pickett over Darnold 32. Or Minshew? Like, I don't know.
Maybe Darnold, just because at least like with Pickett, like he kind of didn't do anything. Darnold will do some stuff, but then also do a lot of bad stuff to your team. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of that's why it's hard to weigh that, because would you rather a guy do almost nothing, but also not really do anything too stupid, or would you rather have a guy who's going to do a lot of stupid stuff, but may occasionally do something cool? Like, I don't really know where I fall on that. Like, I'd rather watch Sam Darnold play, but I might rather have Pickett play if I want my team to win. Like, because they were able to win with him somehow.
They did.
It's kind of hilarious still, but like, there's a reason why we could, because he kind of just didn't do anything most of the time. So it's like, I don't know.
I get it. Shayne, just for fun, I want to throw one more name out here. Quarterback number 33, let's call him Justin Fields.
I would play Fields. Again, do I think he's like definitely way better than Wilson as an overall player? No, but he would just be a better fit for a team that just doesn't have a whole lot going on offensively right now that I trust. And he at least gives you some element of like, there could be a game where we're down by 7 and we need a touchdown. He takes off for 50 yards and we win the game, we tie the game. Like, there's an element of that with him that I think is interesting, and it would just give us a little bit more potential, right? It may end up hurting us also, which is probably why he's not starting. But I think that there would be a higher upside there, obviously.
Yeah, for the same reason I took Jaden Daniels over Russell Wilson,
idea.
I would take Fields as well. I just think it raises the floor and ceiling of your offense, because I do think that he can make those big plays down the field still, but you can also move the chains with your legs. You can chew clock if you need to do that. You can play the type of football that Mike Tomlin wants to play, as long as he's careful with the ball, which has always been an issue. Yeah. But I do think he can just take off and run, and that's more valuable than what Russell's going to offer at this stage in his career. So not counting that one, Shayne, 24th best quarterback for you, 25th best quarterback. And that's only for the 2024 season. That's not even for beyond. Like if we dug down the list and did the Michael Penixes and some of these guys that are waiting in the wings here, if you will, then it's going to go lower than that. So that, and I think that this exercise goes to show you, Shayne, what is the upside of signing Russell to a contract extension? Even if he plays 15% better than he did in Denver, now you've got a 36, 37, 38-year-old quarterback. I mean, do you really trust him to be that guy moving forward if at this stage we're already, even for the 2024 season, just ranking him as the 24th or 25th best quarterback in the league?
Yeah, he would have to reinvent himself as a quarterback late in his career. Like he would have to fundamentally change what has made him a starting quarterback in the NFL for so long. Like, and it's just hard to ask a guy that age to do that, right? Like there's a reason why it didn't work out in Denver, because Peyton wanted a certain kind of quarterback and Russell either wouldn't or can't do that. And now he ends up here. Now, again, I think this system is easier for somebody to assimilate to, but it's still a question of, can he change his ways as a player? Can he kind of settle in and realize, okay, I'm going to have to start trying to target the middle of the field a little bit more. I'm going to have to start using my legs a little bit less and standing in the pocket and trying to find it. Like, can he do that? I don't know, but that's the only way he has a chance of climbing this list, even a few spots, in my opinion. So it's kind of what it is.
Yep, that's my thought process as well. We're going to move on to the game preview. Before we do, I want to get back to this chat right there. Oh, I see you're going to pop that up here. All right, I think we both clicked it at the same time.
We got it up here, I think.
We got a chat here from Delonte. I don't see what you guys see in Daniels. He doesn't play with power to me. I get it. And I'm not claiming that Daniels is like this top-notch starting guard. I don't think he is. I think he's much better pass protector than he is a run blocker. But I think I think the passing game is more important than the running game, quite honestly. And so you have to be able to hold up with pass protection. Run block is a bonus. You want to be able to move guys off the ball. He's not a people mover. But I do think that he is an above average starting guard who has yet to reach the prime of his NFL career. He's starting to get more experience with the Steelers now, and you hope that maybe there can be a coaching change along the offensive line, because we know what Pat Meyer's done these past few years here. It's not been a lot. So I think the question comes down to, do I believe that he's a great option for the future? Probably not. But if I had to choose between him and Seumalo at 32 years old, coming off of an injury, or 31, whatever he's going to be next year, I think that you can at least make the case that you'd rather cut Seumalo and use that money on Daniels, who is still 6 or 7 years younger than Seumalo and doesn't have the injury history. I think that's the point we're trying to make. Was there anything else, Shayne, with that you want to add?
I think more importantly, I understand the power aspect, and I do think he's not a power player, but if we're going to go down this Arthur Smith train, that doesn't matter quite as much for his scheme.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Right?
I mean, he's ideally the perfect type of offensive lineman for Arthur Smith. So we'll see how he plays this season.
Yeah, no, he still needs to be a little bit stronger in the run game a little bit, and I think that this scheme will help him avoid some of those issues, uprooting guys. You know, he's not a guy like, this is originally a center, right? This is originally a guy who's going to be doing a lot of double teams. Like, he is not this powerful guy. So for him, it's more about getting on the move, getting in front of guys, shielding guys off. Hopefully the run game will be a little bit better for him specifically when we get to that during the season. So we'll have to see if he plays well in this game. Again, I expect him to, but if he does, I would rather keep him around long-term than Isaac. So.
Okay. Yeah. Great question, Delonte. Thanks for chiming in. If anybody else has questions, please drop them here. Speaking of Arthur Smith, Shayne, let's talk about Steelers versus Falcons. Arthur Smith's old team. Obviously, Smith was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons the last 3 years. And each of those 3 seasons, Shayne, 7-10 finish. The offense was near the bottom of the league. In 2 of the 3 years. I have to go back and look at the exact numbers.
I think his first Matt Ryan year was okay. Was okay.
It was his first year, and then these past 2 years have been pretty much every bit as rough as what the Steelers had going on for them, which made people question the Arthur Smith hiring, and I understand it to an extent. Obviously, Smith's best time came in Tennessee in 2019 and 2020, where he was leading some competent offenses. There's some top 10 offenses predicated on the running game. But now we look at this last 3-year sample of Smith. We get to face his former team now. I think the Falcons know a lot about Smith. Smith knows a lot about the Falcons. It works both ways here. We talked about that offensive line and some of the players that they have up front. That could give the Steelers some difficulties here. So we'll talk about those matchups as well. But let's start with the odds here, Shayne. The Steelers open this game as it opened at 3-point underdogs for the Steelers. It's that line has increased to 3.5-point underdogs, meaning that if this was played on a neutral playing field, it would be near a pick'em type game. This game is in Atlanta in week 1. They've got the advantage of playing on their own turf down there in their conditions. So, are you okay with the way that the line is set up right now? Like, is that where you would have the odds, or would you have started that somewhere else?
I think this is definitely fair. I think that these teams are in the same tier of teams for me. If I was going to make a list of teams out, which I have not done yet, I will do for other purposes, but besides here, but I would put them in a similar tier. So I think it makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of uncertainty at quarterback for both sides where, with Kirk, it's more about how is he off the Achilles. With us, it's can Russell Wilson be a starting quarterback still? Like, there's questions on both sides at that position in particular. There's just a lot of movement with these teams. So it makes sense that they're pretty much considered, like you said, relatively a toss-up on a neutral site.
Yep, I think that's fair as well. To begin, the point total set at 42 right now, which sounds a little rich to me, honestly, considering these teams' track record of when it comes to scoring points these last couple of years. So that would be well above both of their averages. Now, obviously, new teams, new quarterbacks at the helm for both of these. So let's talk about some of the matchups to watch here, Shayne. Kirk Cousins against Russell Wilson. They're not going against each other, but they're going against their respective defenses from the opposing team. We both said we'd rather have Kirk Cousins over Wilson. The money speaks that as well. Wilson signed for a veteran minimum contract. Cousins did not. 45 million-ish per season for him. And so who do you think gets the better matchup this week? Is it Cousins against Pittsburgh's defense, or is it Wilson against Atlanta's defense?
I do think Atlanta's defense is going to be pretty good this year, but just because of the difference in talent in the front four, especially, I have to say that Wilson has a better matchup. Like, Jesse Bates in the back end is going to have problems. Same thing with
Justin Simmons they got now.
They got
too. And AJ Terrell.
AJ Terrell
can follow. Yeah,
he kept wanting to say Terrell Austin because defense. But no, like that. The back end is very impressive, but the linebacker group, although I like guys like Caden Ellis, there's guys you can take advantage of in the passing game, which is where Arthur Smith wants to attack the passing game. Anyway, I think the front four, especially the edge rush, is not exactly stout right now. I know they got Judon. He's a good player, but I don't think he's a 1. I think he's more of like a low to mid tier 2. Can they get a good enough pass rush going against even our offensive line that's having issues? Like, I still think that Cousins has the disadvantage there, but it's not as big as maybe it would have been this time last year, especially.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think that the Steelers are going to come out firing on all cylinders here. These guys are fresh. They're ready to go. We saw what Herbig did in the preseason. Hopefully you can get a healthy rotation in there. Get after this quarterback that's coming off an Achilles rupture and didn't have a lot of mobility to begin with anyway. Very immobile. But on that thought, Shayne, I want to talk about Atlanta's offensive line because this is a super underrated and just good unit overall. And so much of this matchup obviously it hinges on how can these lines hold up. And not that I necessarily trust Pittsburgh's to hold up because it didn't in the preseason. And we'll see with shuffling new guys in here, how that's going to look. But I want to look at Atlanta's offensive line versus Pittsburgh's pass rush. You've got Caleb McGarry at right tackle. I think he's a really good football player. I don't think this is the easy TJ Watt matchup that's going to have him getting 3 sacks during week 1 like he's able to do on most guys. He's a really good football player. And so I think that one is going to be tough. Who do you see getting the edge in that matchup? Obviously, Watt is that defensive MVP candidate again this year. So we would assume that he still has the leverage over that one.
Yeah, I still give the edge to the Steelers, but I think that in particular, McGarry, he's developed into a great run blocker. The pass protection has become good enough that it was wise to re-sign him, right? It was wise to extend him.
Yeah.
It's not a liability. I do think against the Watts of the world, he's still a guy that just he doesn't have a lot of the foot quickness that you want as a pass protector. I think that he still struggles against guys like Watt that can kind of just finesse you around the edge very quickly. So I still think I'd give the edge to the pass rush in general because Jake Matthews is still a really quality left tackle, but getting up there a little bit, obviously not quite at the level of some of these other older tackles. So I think Highsmith should have a good chance there. And the interior, like Lindstrom, obviously a great player.
Yes.
Much better run blocker than pass blocker, still a good pass blocker. But Drew Dahlman and Matthew Bergeron are the weak links of this offensive line. And I think obviously Heyward being fully healthy to start the year and Keanu Benton, those are the two that I think could cause the most actual direct problems for this line, just because that's where the weakness lies.
100%. And that's where I was going to go next. I do think that's where you are going to want to exploit.
Yes.
Not that any of these guys are bad football players.
No, they're all starting caliber players in my opinion.
Yes. And Lindstrom, you mentioned Lindstrom over at right guard. For what it's worth, he graded out as the #1 offensive guard in the league for 2 straight seasons now. And so there's a case to be made that he is the best at his position in football right now. He's such a good run blocker and everything else. And so that one, I think that's going to be like Ogunjobi over there. Sometimes Keanu Benton. Heyward plays mostly over on the other side. And so it should, Heyward against Bergeron is one that I wanted to see him exploit that matchup. Hopefully he's fully healthy, not bothered by that groin anymore. I'm sure he is at this point. We'll see if he's looking his age or if he's looking more like he did in 2022 before all the injuries started, the soft tissue stuff there. So offensive line versus defensive line, it's always big. Doesn't matter what team you're playing. Those matchups always matter. Shayne, let's talk a little bit here about George Pickens against AJ Terrell. Who do you think has the advantage in this one? Terrell's a really good football player. He just got paid over $20 million a year to play cornerback for the Atlanta Falcons. That's a lot for corner. That's like top 2. I think he's the second highest paid. Well, third now because Surtain just got his money today.
Or something like that. Yeah.
So reset. Yes, there's been a reset of the market, and Joey Porter's probably salivating over that right now in a few years when he just going to look to get his bag at least. So we haven't even had Sauce Gardner reset it over top of that yet.
That's the guy that's going to be. I'm curious because the corner market's kind of fallen behind the receiver market pretty heavily, and I get that because there's just fewer corners that are consistently great than receivers. So I understand that. But Sauce might get close to. I mean, he might make a 3, 4, 5 million jump on that per year price.
Yeah, it's possible for sure. He's that good. I do think that receivers should get paid in general higher than corners. You can funnel an offense through them. You can score points with them. But that's a topic we'll table for another time. But who do you think between Pickens and Terrell gets the better end of this matchup this week?
I mean, I think the problem is I don't think Terrell really needs to worry about it too much because they can kind of just shadow Pickens with one of the safeties, and he can. I think he's a good enough player to give issues. But I think in general, if we're just talking about who's the better player, Terrell just has a longer track record and has been a really good player. But Pickens, it doesn't really matter if you cover him good if you throw him the ball. So it's kind of a weird matchup with him, right? I think he's going to get his if they are trying to do that. I think they'll give him opportunities. Hopefully his run and catch threat like they did last year a lot. Hopefully they can get him a couple times lined up just on whether it's Terrell or just single coverage in general and throw him a deep ball or just something up for him to go get. But in general, there's a lot of corners that theoretically match up well with George until the ball's in the air, right? And it's you never know.
Yeah.
So I do give the edge to the Falcons in general with that matchup against Pickens and Terrell specifically, but he's still probably going to make a couple catches. Everybody's like, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, and if I'm the Falcons, my game plan is really easy. I am putting either Jesse Bates or Justin Simmons over the top of wherever Terrell is lined up against Pickens every single play, and I am not going to let that guy win. I'm going to let Calvin Austin beat me. I'm going to let Scotty Miller and whoever, Pat Freiermuth.
So be it.
But yes, if they want to dink and dunk the football down the field to your slot receivers or your tight end, by all means do that. I'm not letting Pickens beat me down the field. That would be my strategy. So I'm sure they'll end up deploying some variation of that. They're not oblivious to how special of a talent that guy is at winning down the football field. So what other matchups, Shayne, come to your head in this contest? Is there anything else that you really are looking to dial into here week 1 and watch?
I think partially because of the fact that the receiving weapons are so kind of just inconsistent with the Steelers right now, and just outside of George. I think Freiermuth versus linebackers for that team, like especially Troy Anderson, who's going to be getting a chance to start here in year 3, plays more. He's been very up and down, super athletic guy, but he just doesn't have the instincts at linebacker really right now. Like coverage feel is not really there. They have to find ways to get Pat open over the middle of the field and take advantage of that, because that's the one place, especially if the safeties are trying to kind of help keep the top on the defense, that's the one place you might be able to consistently attack with the passing game. So I think Pat's matchup with those guys, just really anybody running inside the middle of the field, they have to be able to get open and win, because the outside is going to be tough.
I agree. And I think those are the type of matchups that you look for. We saw Peyton Wilson. Like, I don't understand why teams don't use the whip route more, like that inside whip where Wilson got fooled on it. As savvy as that guy feels already as a rookie, that is just such a great route to
if you can run that route good. Yeah.
So I'd love to see that implemented there. But yeah, I agree. Troy Anderson, very inexperienced linebacker there, very athletic football player, but that's one that you could potentially exploit there as well. How do you think both running games fare this week, Shayne? I know that's really what both these teams are built around, is a running game. Who's going to have more success on the ground?
I mean, Falcons' offensive line is a run blocking unit. It's pretty up there. Like, it's just, that's kind of their bread and butter. I think they can protect well enough to make Cousins a good player for them. But I do think where they're going to really get after it is the run game. And you have Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier, like, these are guys who can run the rock. Like, you just give them 20, 25 carries. Both these guys can handle that. So I think that they're going to overall have a little bit more success. I think the Steelers' success is more tied to it because of our lack of, obviously the familiarity with the receivers right now, with Russell Wilson coming in. Like, I think we're going to try to establish the ground game immediately, because that's the only real, to me, path of having an identity offensively, right? But it's hard to give the Steelers the edge. As great as their running back tandem is, the Falcons may have an even better one, depending on who you ask, especially with Bijan. If he can kind of be the player that we expect him to be, it's going to be hard.
Algier was good last year too.
Yeah, he's a great player. There's a reason why Bijan didn't have 300 carries, because Algier was like, yeah, listen, I'm still here. I had 1,000 yards as a rookie. What about it? So.
Yeah, and I think the big advantage that they have in all of this is their line has that chemistry already. Yeah. They've got the same 5 up there. The Steelers are mixed matching guys around, and it's going to take some time to gel. Just like we've seen in year past, every time that you insert new players here, and we don't even know where they're going to end up being halfway through the season. Maybe they'll move again. Maybe you'll wise up and move Broderick to left tackle, or whatever you do. But it's going to take some time at the very least. So I would give the edge for sure to Atlanta in the running game. I'll look at the other side of the ball here real quick in Atlanta's passing game. In Pittsburgh's defense against them, I assume that Porter's going to be following Drake London around the field. Outside of London, now Kyle Pitts, obviously good receiving threat, hasn't been as dominant as people had hoped. He's dealing with a hamstring injury right now, and he is limited in practice for what it's worth. But if you stop Drake London and you take away the top receiving option for Kirk Cousins in this game, their receiving core looks like Pittsburgh's outside of their number one guy. It's rough there. You've got Darnell Mooney, you've got Ray McLeod, who was awful in Pittsburgh, bounced back a little bit, mostly as a special teams guy for the 49ers, but they do not have a lot of receivers that you can funnel this offense through. So Porter against London, who gets the better in that matchup, and how does Pittsburgh's pass defense do this week?
I do think London is going to get his. Just he's such a load for corners to handle because of his size. He's
big guy, good route runner.
Yeah, much quicker than you'd expect. He's definitely turned into a player that I think was worthy of being selected where he was selected in the draft, right? So I think that's the biggest thing for them. The thing that I am a little scared of Darnell Mooney, because if you look at his like underlying metrics of like how often he was getting open for the Bears last year, if they just threw him the ball, he might have had 1,000 yards himself last year. Like, it was that was how often he was being ignored in the passing game by Fields, unfortunately. That's a little bit talking bad about our quarterback that may or may not have to play. But again, he was the second read a lot of the time, and that read didn't do that a whole lot. So I think if we have a Cousins there, I think if we give all of his attention, Mooney was a guy that was a deep threat player. He was one of those guys that kind of gets down the field really well. We saw it early in his career with the Bears. Like, he could get us a 75-yard touchdown if we're not careful. Now, I think Dante Jackson is a good enough player to kind of hopefully keep him in check, and that's coming from someone who doesn't really have a high opinion of Dante Jackson. But it is something where I think if we care too much about taking London out of the game, Mooney could pop one for a deep touchdown that could change the game. So we have to be careful with him too.
Yeah, I agree with that. And Shayne, just one more here. And I think this might be even the biggest question on the Steelers depth chart right now. Slot cornerback.
Yeah.
Like, are you rolling Beanie Bishop out there? Do you want to see them kind of moving guys around? I doubt they moved Dante Jackson in the slot just because he's never done it. But Corey Trice played a little bit there. Like, what do you want to see happen, and how do you think that's going to go this week?
I think what they're going to do is Bishop is probably going to play the majority of the snaps there, and hopefully that means that they're not using London as a slot receiver too much, because I think that that's where he can do his most damage. But I think when London's in the slot, Joey will just happen to also be in the slot, right? Like that's kind of how that works. I think though, when there's true slot receivers out there, like a Ray or somebody like that, I think Bishop will get most of the targets or most of the touches there, snaps. But what I want them to do is just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. Let Corey Trice go out there for 5 or 10 snaps. Let Darius Rush go out there for a little bit. Let Elliott come down and play in the closer to the line of scrimmage a little bit and send KZ back, whatever. Like, you need to just try stuff and see what is working, because as much as I'm happy for Bishop that he made this team as an undrafted rookie, I can't feel confident about him being a guy that gets 60, 70, 80% of the snaps right away.
I think that's the right approach. And it's totally what I would do as well, because I think the beginning of the season should be about getting things figured out. You don't want your season to tank because you go on a 0-3 skid or something that way. But at the same time, you've got to figure out where these guys are best, who's the most talented in the right spots here. Same with the offensive line. It's the same with slot cornerback. Move them around, see what works, and then move forward with that. So I agree with that approach, although I don't know for sure if that's something they're going to do. Keep an eye on the slot cornerback, though. I think that could play a big role as early as week 1 here, just because of how big of a question mark it's been for the Steelers. All right, Shayne, let's get to our game predictions and then our season prediction before we close out today's show. We didn't do a season prediction last time, so I wanted to make sure we did that, have one on the record here, so we can go back and see how foolish we looked by the end of the season, or see if we got Tomlin figured out here. So game prediction, Steelers versus Falcons in week 1. How do you see this game playing out? Can you give us a score?
Yeah, so I have 24-21 Falcons. I think that, unfortunately for the Steelers, you're going into obviously a hostile environment. Arthur Smith is going to be amped up, you imagine, trying to get revenge on his former team. But I think the Falcons are just more equipped to win a game early in the season right now, because they did go out and get the better veteran quarterback, for example. They have a more consistent run game, more consistent offensive line. The defense, while it's not kind of good in the front half of things, the back half is really tough. And if you get to a situation where you have to start throwing the football, if you do have a lead that you get on the Steelers, you're probably going to be able to keep it, right? Like, we just don't have a ton of options in the passing game right now. So I think game script is going to matter a lot here. I think if the Falcons can get off to a decent lead at any point, it's going to be hard for the Steelers to kind of crawl back. But ultimately, I think the Falcons edge us out. I think we make it close late to get to the 21-24, but we don't get the ball again to try to tie the game.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also going with the Falcons here, and I've got a little bit lower scoring game. I've got 21-17. The Falcons taking their home game here in the opener. I don't trust Steelers to put it all together offensively yet. I think that's one of my biggest holdups. I do think the defense can hold the Falcons near the 20-point mark, but offensively, the Steelers, they kind of have to prove it to me first. I know that the preseason always doesn't translate into the NFL. You can come out and put up a big performance still, but I wasn't encouraged by what I saw. Too many checkdowns. The running game wasn't firing on all cylinders. The passing games, we still have yet to see a capable option outside of George Pickens in terms of wide receivers. So I think that it's going to, the offense gets off to a pretty slow start here in week 1. And so I've got 21-17 in favor of the Falcons. Steelers dropping their first game before going to Denver next week, or having the home game against Denver next week, right? So. All right. Let's do our season predictions here while we're at it, Shayne. I wanted to make sure that we got these done. I did mine on steelcurtain.com. You can go and check them out over there, but let's do these on the show real quick before we sign off for today. Another long show this week.
Yeah, what do you have about, though, right?
There is so much to talk about, so much to rant about. What do you have in terms of Steelers record prediction this year, Shayne, and do they make the playoffs?
So I do have them doing what they always do, which means they're going to be over 500. But I do have them, sadly, at just 9-8 and barely missing out on the playoffs in a very stacked and difficult to break into AFC playoff picture.
Shayne, I've got the same record, 9-8, just narrowly missing the playoffs. Unfortunately, there was a time where 9 could potentially get you in. Not happening anymore. It's just the way that it is. I mean, there might be 3 teams tied with 9 wins outside of the playoff picture. And then it goes off of tiebreakers outside of that for the seed that just missed. But I think that it requires 10 wins to get into the playoffs. And I just have a hard time seeing that happen. You're going to have to steal a game or two that you are not favored in. It's just as simple as that. And I don't see Steelers being favored in a lot of these contests this year. So I have them at 9-8, and it just has them outside that 7th and final spot, that 3rd wild card spot this year in the AFC playoff picture. All right, that's going to do it for our show today. I hope we're wrong on our prediction, Shane. I hope the Steelers come around and blow our socks off here with an offensive performance in Week 1 against the Falcons. What do you guys think? If you've got any thoughts on this game, please drop them in the comment section below on YouTube. Remember to like and subscribe this stream. Please help bring others to this. If you like what we do, tell others about it. We go live every single Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern time. And also don't forget to check out Josh Yorish's show. He goes live on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern as well. Thank you all for joining us on the show today. You can follow Shayne on Twitter at Shayne Kubas. You can follow me on Twitter at Tommy Jaggi. You can download the Steel Curtain podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Also check us out on YouTube or ask Alexa to play the Steel Curtain podcast. And thanks again for listening to the Steel Curtain podcast.